Hi, welcome to the Cows Podcast. I'm your host, Hunter Burney. A catalyst is defined as a person or thing that precipitates an event. A catalyst is something that it participates in a reaction, but does not get consumed in the reaction. There's a heart behind this podcast for, people with aspirations. There's a heart behind this podcast for motivated people that want to make a difference, that have a bias for action, that really, truly want to be a catalyst in the environment around them, both professionally and personally, in their homes, in their workplace, and beyond. So welcome to this podcast. I really hope you're enjoying the series that we're in. Welcome to this episode, and let's dive right in. We'll jump into the third segment here with Jonni Redick. So as we close this out, I really like to just hear from your perspective. And we've already talked a little bit about this. If you're listening right now and you have not caught the first or second episode or both really in this conversation, be sure to listen to those. Like, stop this episode and go back and listen to those. We've already referenced some of the things that I'm going to ask her to kind of reiterate. But her story is fantastic. Episode 1 is really just a great run through. And I wanted to set the stage. I mean, obviously what you're doing now is wonderful and ties in very well with the This Is Leadership theme. But, I really enjoyed hearing you kind of unpack and kind of step through blazing the trail through your path in law enforcement. But what I really like to do in kind of the third segment is looking forward to things. What are you most excited about? And the second thing, and we can get into this in a minute, but I just really like to hear some of the things, and again, we've already referenced a few, about advice for those younger career or kind of middle of the career, first management type role, first leadership type role. And again, we can get into that after, but what are you excited about looking forward?
So what I'm excited about looking forward to actually is, I finished a manuscript probably like a couple of months ago. It is a memoir of sorts, but it is wrapped around my leadership ascension in my organization. But it also includes, the story of my childhood wrapped in there, and that impact of, being abandoned and, left by a mother who was dealing with her own addictions and her own really stability in life. And how, as a young child, I was trying to just go along for the journey until I got to an age where I didn't want to go along with her journey anymore. But I was so kind of damaged already, and some of the experiences that I had. And, the beauty of what I'm excited about is I'm actually at a publisher. We are hoping to have it out in the spring. It is, I'm biracial, so it's called Black, White, and Blue, because it is my ascension through my leadership journey in policing, along with my biracial, conflict with my identity and where I fit, and how that translated into how I fit in this law enforcement space, being a female, being a biracial female in a male white dominant industry. But it also talks about the leadership perseverance, right? And how I didn't have to be perfect, but I didn't discover that till the end of my journey, because I was trying to be all of these things, being a mother, being a wife, being a daughter to a mother who, raised me in a broken childhood, but now trying to be a good daughter. And the tragedy that comes along with that really reshapes our paradigms. And, as you move up in leadership, how you're working on your own leadership, sometimes broken out of crisis, right? Because there's so much cumulative trauma that happens, in policing. And so it's just this whole experience that I take through in my book. And so I'm really excited about that, because I just think it's going to really transcend, not just for women, not just for women of color, but for people, because we all have a story, right? And for me, the double excitement is I was courageous enough to get it published, because oftentimes these things are very close to us. They're very vulnerable. But this is where the greatest testimony is. This is where the majority of, if you really want to help others, can come from. It's when we're, willing to be seen. And so I'm super excited about that. And to continue to be able to do the great work as I'm called on. I, just recently finished working with our university in a particular panel discussion relative to some issues that are going on in our country right now about social injustice and policing. And so brought a really great panel that'll be part of our curriculum moving forward in the institution for years to come, that is really important to have, because when you have practitioners in the field who are coming through your educational and your graduate programs, we want to really bring in experiences that will help them go out the very next day and be applicable to their leadership roles. And so that was really exciting, and we're doing some continued work in that area. And I have several other projects that are going to be really good. And I love having things that are really worthwhile and change the landscape for all of us.
Yeah, that sounds very consistent with your career and kind of blazing that trail. That's awesome. So Black, White, and Blue, did you, and maybe I missed it, just engrossed in your story. Is there an official release date or target or?
There's not an official release date. We just have projected for spring. So it's more like April of 2021, but I definitely will let you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually might time out really well with when this will actually be published. So we're recording this in January, but yeah, that may time out really well.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that, very much so.
Yeah, you should be. I mean, that's
thank you.
If you have a lot of different aspects that come into the story that it might hear in parts in silos, but man, it's just all wrapped up in one big package. So I can't wait. That's an exciting story.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so you were asking me about some things for new leaders and mid-level managers and things for them to actually think about. So sometimes people come into their supervision and their leadership kind of with the acronym WIFM, what's in it for me. And I would just tell them, I would caution them to have that approach, right? Because a lot of times we come into it because of the pay, maybe the power, and it could be simply because nobody else is going to do it. Why don't I do it? And I think it's a mindset. And so you have to really have the right mindset for leadership. Not everybody is designed to be a leader, but it doesn't mean that you can't become one. And so I would just really, tell them to set themselves up for this journey, because it's not like a one and done. This becomes the rest of your career if you stayed employed where you are, you stay in the position that you are. And always be a continual learner. So even though the organization provides training or, awareness, challenge that. Are you reading? Are you a reader, right? There are tons of books that would help build your leadership. So build your own library of leadership reading where you can start to understand concepts, so you don't have to have like an abridged version of emotional intelligence. So the 4 things. Really get an understanding, right? So that now you can go and communicate and just demonstrate and really live these things as a leader. Another thing that's really important is active listening. A lot of times we're in such a hurry to, problem solve, or we think we're critical thinking, but we don't take time to actively listen to what it is that somebody's sharing with us. And there's verbal cues, there's, physical cues, there's all kind of cues that if we're not paying attention to what we're talking about or conveying, our message isn't being received. And nor are we going to, solve anything if we're not paying attention. So active listening is actually an art. And so if that's something that you're not strong in, practice it. Try it with your children, try it with your spouse, right? And really lean into that nuance, which comes to me with this high level of EQ, of really having empathy and awareness and knowing how to build that relationship around it, because everything is relational. And we've talked about that before, about transactional, but it's relational. And in the relationship, it creates a transformation on how you're going to work together and a lot of things. Another thing is be authentic. Do not try to be somebody else. Be yourself. And, we can look around and envy others and their style of leadership and all of these things, but really be authentic to yourself, because if you're not, you're going to create other issues internally. The stress you're already going to have may become more stressful because you're not congruent with who you are and who you want to be in your leadership. And so be authentic. Humility, be humble. I don't know how many times I have to self-talk to myself to bring my humility back into perspective, because I'm confident and I'm competent and I'm knowledgeable. And sometimes I just want to put it out there, but I have to have humility in how I'm going to deliver the message, how I'm going to engage the person, because I don't want to, offend them. I don't want to make them feel less than, and I want them to stay engaged with me. So if I humble myself and I approach our conversations like that, it's so much more beneficial for all of us. And then, the other things I also say is ask questions. You don't have to think that you know everything when you're a new leader or even a manager. I mean, I don't know how many times I would be out at a scene or have an incident happen, and I would ask somebody because I just didn't know. But it was hard to do it the first few times. But then when I started asking, it got easier to ask, because sometimes we don't ask because we don't want to look incompetent, because, well, I promoted, I'm supposed to know. Well, you can't possibly know everything. But if it is something that you don't know and you ask and now you learn it, you should not be asking that a bunch of times afterwards. You need to learn it, understand it, and know it. But the next thing will come up and ask, right? Yeah. And so, those are some of the things that I would say to new leaders, middle managers, and don't strive for perfect. Perfection will kill you.
Yeah.
Perfection will literally kill you. If you look at data analytics for people in jobs who have stress, and you look at the reasons for stress and the internal illnesses that a lot of employees retire with after work, it's because not only because we're working long hours, we're sedentary, the stress of, but also some of that is how we perceive the work that we're doing or ourselves, and we feel like it has to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, we create all this stress for ourselves, and that internally ends up affecting us. And so I would say give yourself grace to make mistakes. Mistakes is where, I think somebody called it, failing forward. If you fail forward is where you're going to learn the best, right? We don't want to have a catastrophic failure, but failing forward is okay. And in your leadership, it's okay for you, but you also have to extend the grace to your employees if they do. Now, again, that doesn't mean if something's not egregious, you have to, do what you do. But most of the mistakes that most of our employees make and we make, they're not catastrophic. I mean, I don't know how many times I'd have somebody go, Chief, oh my God, we printed all these up and there's a typo and they're just stressed out. And it took them a while to come tell me. And I'm like, well, can't we just redo it? So be reasonable. Have the grace. These are people. You're a person. And then, your leadership journey should be fun. It should be more fun and enjoyable than stressful and miserable. And if it's stressful and miserable, then perhaps you shouldn't be doing it.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's a 7-minute masterclass. And seriously, right? I mean, I think you hit on everything that I would think about in terms of what things did I hear or wish I would have heard, advancing into first couple leadership roles. And the ones that resonate with me the most would be, what people refer to as kind of the imposter syndrome and feeling like you've got to have every answer. I've learned to actually do the opposite. Like right now, as we record this, I'm relatively new into a new role, leadership role, and my philosophy is there are questions that I can ask and get away with asking right now that in 3 months I won't be able to ask anymore. So I'm going to err on asking the dumb question and too many questions, because it's like a hall pass. It's like you're not going to get this forever, but you get it for a little bit. So,
Well, and the great thing about you asking the question sometimes also helps the person you're asking the question of be refreshed on something that maybe they haven't actually had to deal with or hadn't considered because they're dealing with different things now, right? And so it can be, reciprocal in that process.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, just as we wind this down, couple just kind of random questions here. You mentioned reading, and you're in the academic world, but are you reading anything right now? Is that something that's part of your current rhythm? Are you reading anything
Yeah.
personally?
So actually, I have my little mini library because, we're all working remotely from home. So my
Mm-hmm.
husband occupies the office.
Okay.
So I occupy the dining room table and what's in here. And so I just finished The Big Leap by Hendricks. So, that's all about our upper limits and identifying our zone of genius or,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise known as our calling, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that one was really big for me because even though I felt like I didn't have a lot of upper limits, I realized that I actually do have some that are limiting me from even greater potential on some of the things that I want to do. Some of them around the business, but some of them very personally on things that I want to be able to accomplish. So it helped to open me up there. I'm reading another book called Boundaries. I can't remember the authors, but the Boundaries was really important. It's Christian based,
Mm-hmm.
but it helps to remind me of boundaries for myself around me emotionally, spiritually, physically, how to create those so I don't overextend myself or I'm
Mm-hmm.
not overexposed to, maybe the news or the media or people that aren't good for what I want to do or where I want to go or the space I want to create.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two that I've one I finished, the other one I'm halfway through, and then the other one that I started was it's called Blue Ocean Strategy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I can't remember the author either, but it's really about creating your own blue ocean relative to your business,
Mm-hmm.
so you're not in the bloody waters of competition, but
Mm-hmm.
creating a space that's really a niche and for you, where you can just swim in your blue ocean all day long and do the work you want to do. And that's really what I want to try to do in 21 is really work to refine my blue ocean in my business and any other aspects relative to a blue ocean because I love that analogy. So those are just a few.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, those are great. I haven't read all of them. I did. So the version of the Blue Ocean I've got is in the Harvard Business Review like on strategy book. So
Mhm.
it's kind of a combination. But I think that's very much in line. Like I, if I had to assign a term like or describe Johnny Redick and just one or two, the first thing that comes to mind is trailblazer. Like you've literally blazed your own trail. So I think that's very much in line with the concept of blue ocean and differentiate and kind of blaze your own trail. So I have no doubt this will be a great year for GL Consulting and excited to keep in touch with how that evolves for you.
Yes, thank you very much.
The other question I had, and I really I've steered away from having too much quarantine talk, but I'm just naturally curious. You're in the West Coast, California, haven't been able to do much the last almost a year.
Yeah.
What is have you picked up new hobbies or what has that been like? Because and the reason I ask because I'm in Middle Tennessee, life is more or less back to normal. Here we just wear
Mm.
masks, so I don't know what the experience is like. I'm not sure how I would handle it.
Yeah, no. So when it first initially the shutdown came so quickly in the beginning for all of us, right? For everybody. And then everybody was being lifted and people were staying closed down and we've been closed down and, open partially in some places. So people would drive to other towns to go have dinner and, all of this stuff. And,
Mm,
for us, I've been retired for, a couple of years. So it was kind of like I already was in a mode of understanding how to isolate a little bit, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It was just really figuring out how to do that with our adult children
mm,
who are, an hour and a half from us. And, so we started having Zoom calls. so we could communicate with them and stay connected. And even though they're the young adults, they've never experienced anything significant in their generation, really, if you think about it. And so really helping them to kind of find their, balance and stability and certainty, at least in and through us, even though things were uncertain all around. So we try to do that consistently, or FaceTime them individually and stay very overly connected. Like, not that we weren't connected before, but we didn't have to be, right? So just staying really connected with them. We created a pattern. With our friends, we probably Zoom every other month with different couples or different groups just to check on people. Our friends that are in our neighborhood, we always walk and go see them and stop outside and have a conversation from the curb. And stay connected. My husband is an avid runner, so he runs absolutely every day, maybe a day off, I don't know. Good for him. I walk, and I got myself a Peloton. That was my gift last year to myself to say, no reason not to stay relatively healthy. And we just really shifted our paradigm a little bit in what was important, or at least what we thought was important, was going to dinners and going to parties, to say, you know what, we can still be engaged and connected to our friends and family. We just have to do it differently. And we have to, like I mentioned before, we have to be very intentional about it. Because just a brief story, my second husband and I, we dated long distance for almost 6 years, because he lived in how California stretched out. I lived in Northern California and he lived in Southern California. And we became best friends over the phone. Before we could spend our actual life together. And so, if we take time to understand how important just conversation is, undistracted by dinners, by movies, by parties, and really, give to the person that we're talking to, we're just going to build stronger relationships. We're going to know them better. And that's really what's kind of happened, during COVID. And of course, a lot more time to be creative and productive. And I tell my son and his wife, they just had my grandson, do you know that this is a blessing in this whole, catastrophic time for everybody, to see the gratitude and the blessing that you both get to be home with your newborn. One of you would have had to go back to work by now. You would have had to figure out how to find childcare, because although I'm a loving grandmother, I have work still. I still do things. And so they get to be home and raise their son together. Families get to be home, even though it's hard teaching children online and, working online, you get to be together. Life is priceless and it's short. And so we've just recalibrated our whole thinking, and every day we get up with gratitude. And I try to shine it on my kids, even though they're like, oh my God, Mom, not the gratitude again today. And I'm like, I'm grateful, and you need to be grateful. So yeah. That's
awesome. Appreciate you sharing that.
So
absolutely. For those watching or listening, what's the best way to get a hold or just follow you or anything like that?
Yeah. So I'm JL Consulting Solutions. It's pretty simple. That's my website. I'm on Instagram as JL Consulting Solutions. I'm on LinkedIn. It's by my name, Jonni Redick. I think most people don't probably do Facebook as much anymore, but those are my social streams. I'm also, every now and then, I'll do a room on Clubhouse, the new app that's out for iPhone users. And usually it's just under my name, Jonni Redick. So watch out for me there. And that's just free, conversations when you jump in those rooms. So I like to do those every now and then. But I'm available all over the place.
That's awesome. So funny. We'll end here in a second. The whole Clubhouse thing, I want to find you on there. I just got on there, but I've spent probably a total of like 45 minutes just listening. But I've been itching to like start my own room and
oh, you should definitely do it, Hunter. Absolutely.
I didn't want to overcommit myself with the new job and everything.
But it's not a commit. So Clubhouse is a social platform where it's pretty informal. So just like you jumped on here to record with me,
Yeah.
You say, you know what, I've got 30 minutes or an hour today. You know what, I'm going to jump on Clubhouse. I'm going to start a room, see whoever comes in. It could be small and intimate, or it could grow.
Yeah.
And you share whatever that is that you want to talk about. You can bring people up on stage and ask them questions, or they can ask you questions. And people love to hear interaction like that. And you learn so much. And then you end the room. And that's it. So there's like no big time setup and all this formal thing. It's really almost like inviting somebody in to have a conversation with you in your home, out at, you know, having coffee, kind of like Coffee with Bob without the video component. It's just, you know, you're all in the room together.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
That is cool. I want to spend some more time on it. When you start a room or hop on, you know, let me know, ping me.
Absolutely. I'm new too. I've only been on a couple of weeks, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to have a room. So I had a room, and I had some great people come on stage with me. Yeah. They shared their expertise or their thoughts. We answered some questions. And before we knew it, we were already in it like 40 minutes or something, 45. And then we just ended the room, because you don't have to set it for a time or anything. It's however long you want to be in there.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, back to the contact info. I'll be sure to have links in the show notes if you're listening or watching. So, Jonni, it's been a real pleasure. Just love hearing your story, getting to know you, and I appreciate you being on the Catalyst podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hunter.
Thank you for being a part of this journey. Definitely subscribe and like. Check out Be a Catalyst on Instagram and on Twitter. Also, don't forget to check out the YouTube channel, where you'll find videos in addition to the Catalyst podcast recordings that give a little bit more context around my heart for training, my heart for seeing early to middle managers and first-time leaders really thrive and be a catalyst in the organization that they're in the project that they are after, everything that goes along with that. So thank you for being a part of this. Tune in for the next episode, and remember, be you, be confident, be a catalyst.